Hello! Today we're going to learn the Harry Potter OST on piano. This piece was arranged by composer Jarrod Radnich and became quite popular. It's not only because the music itself is good, but also because the arrangement looks really flashy and difficult. So, why does it look so difficult? Let's think about that as we go through the piece today. First, let's take a look at the time signature. It's in 3/8 time signature. That means there are 3/8 notes in each measure. So there are 3/8 notes per measure. And did you know that these 3/8 notes are the same duration as one dotted quarter note? So sometimes you'll see a dotted quarter note in a measure as well. Also, it's in 3/8 meter. It's in a 3-beat system. We need to count 1, 2, 3 for each measure. If you practice dividing each measure into 3, keeping the rhythm in the later sections won't be as difficult. Now, with the 3/8 time signature in mind, let's check the key signature. The key signature is the part between the clef and the time signature. And here we can see there's an F sharp indicated. This means that every F we play in the piece needs to be sharp unless there's a natural sign indicating otherwise. It means that every time you encounter an F, you need to play F sharp. But beyond that, this key signature has a more important meaning. This piece is in E minor. And the F sharp indicates that. You might be wondering what that means. I've made a separate video on key signatures, so feel free to check that out if you're curious. If you don't want to dive too deep into that, just remember, this piece is in E minor. The first note is an E, because it's an E minor piece. The note E keeps ringing, right? Yes, so you can understand that this is an E minor piece. This is important because if you look at measure 21, you'll see the E minor scale pattern. This is an E minor scale.
Mi, fa, sol, la, si, ra, sol, fa, mi.
And then, in an E minor scale pattern, in a minor scale, you always raise the 7th note by a half step. Many people don't know this. Let me show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Raise the 7th note by a half step. So, it goes like this. But why do we do that? That 7th note, this is called the leading tone. Now, what note do you naturally expect to hear next, everyone? Which note does it lead to? It leads to the note C, tonic. The 7th note is called the leading tone, and there's nothing between C and B in the scale. No additional note. But in the E minor scale, if you look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There is a note between the 7th and 8th. To remove that note, we raise the D to D sharp. So what role does this raised note play? It leads to the note E, which is why we always raise the 7th note by a half step in minor scales. It creates a sense of tension that resolves back to the tonic note, E in this case. In a harmonic minor scale, we raise the 7th note to create that tension. You can see this in measure 45, where there's a D sharp. This D sharp is here because it's the raised 7th note in the scale. You'll see it again in measure 46, though it's lowered when the melody descends. This scale pattern appears frequently in the piece, so it's important to be aware of it. D sharp is added here. All right, that was a bit of a long explanation, but I hope it's clear now. Let's get started with the first part of the piece. We'll begin with an E minor chord. The time signature is 3/8, but since this is a pickup measure, we don't play the first 2 beats. So
1, 2, 3.
You begin like this. You have a pickup measure. So again,
1, 2, 3.
By now, you've probably heard this rhythm many times. Let's break it down theoretically. We're counting each eighth note as one beat, but here we have a dotted eighth note, which lasts for 1.5 beats. So it goes like this.
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3.
Because it's dotted eighth note, it's 1.5 beat. Then we have a 16th note, which lasts for half a beat, and the eighth note lasts for 1 beat. When we count, it goes
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
It turns out like this, right? You should be able to play this part without much trouble. Next. Let's look at a full phrase. Here we have a G minor chord. G, B flat, D. G, B flat, D, G, B flat, D, D, G, D. G, B flat, D. They're all in the G minor chord tone. And then an F minor chord, F, A flat, C. You can choose to play this with one hand or follow the score, but I personally prefer playing it with one hand. The melody starts again here. In the E minor scale that we talked about earlier. This part might be tricky because of the F sharp on the black key. The fourth finger is often the hardest to control because of the way our hands are built. But don't worry, everyone struggles with this. Maybe your beat is not stable here. One good exercise is to keep the other fingers pressed down while lifting each finger. This can help you build more control, though it might take some time. Don't overdo it though. Did you know that the composer Schumann injured his hand by trying to strengthen his fourth finger too much? So be careful and don't push yourself too hard. Once you get comfortable with this movement, it'll feel smoother, almost like a candle's flame flickering. If you make it natural, crescendo and decrescendo, it'll be easier to play it. When you express these detailed things, your techniques is often better. So here you have to match it with the B in the left hand, like this. Here again, I play with one hand if you find it easier. In this E minor scale, match it with the B and then G minor chord and then F minor chord. I play it with one hand too here. Don't forget to change the pedal once per measure because the chords are changing per measure. Next, we have a glissando, and in this part, the left hand carries the melody. Listen carefully to the left hand.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Mi, fa, sharp. Sol, si, sol, fa, sharp, si, si, mi, sol, fa, mi, si, la, fa, sharp, fa, si.
The right hand is playing the glissando, and focus on the left hand for the melody. When you play a glissando on the white keys, I find it's easier to use your fingernail to slide across the keys. And the right hand. So you need to follow your finger number and practice dividing them well. I'll talk about dividing the finger numbers with my right hand in the second lecture next time. As for glissando, I'll explain it to you now. It goes from E to here, then from E again goes to here, then down. That's how it works. This isn't that important. You just need to match the range. It doesn't matter if you play D rather than E. You just need to match the range. This technique doesn't require too much practice because playing it too much can actually hurt your hand. But you do need to mimic the movement in practice so you can perform it confidently later on. You need to mimic the motion so that you can bring out the feeling you've practiced and perform it effectively. Let's take a look. I'll play it as if I were practicing. Got it? So you practice like this. Now, the difficult part begins. This section might seem challenging at first, but it's actually not as hard as it looks. Did I sound too much like Bob Ross? Trying to play every single note perfectly can be exhausting. Sometimes it's okay to let the notes flow naturally. If you've seen my performance video from when I was younger, you'll know what I mean. It's almost like you're just touching the keys. This is where practicing Czerny exercises really pays off, especially the chromatic scales. This is chromatic scale. Most difficult and flashy pieces contain chromatic scales. The chromatic scale is essential for sounds flashy. So after learning the techniques, it's like a cheat key. Keep the cheat key here and apply it here. This is the cheat key I learned from Czerny. And the scale shows up too, right? And it keeps showing up like arpeggio. There are only 3 of these: arpeggio, scale, chromatic scale, left-handed melody, right-handed melody, and that's it. In the next lesson, I'll explain in more detail about fingerings and how to practice them in more detail. For now, practice up to this point, and I'll see you in the next lesson. See you next time. Bye.